Here we're kind of being asked to look at international parity conditions. So we've got an individual named Caleb, and they are attempting to determine whether US and Japanese financial conditions are at parity. And so we've got some data to work with here, some assumptions. We've got the current spot rate, flat 91 yen to the dollar. We've got 360-day forward rates of 86 to the dollar. We've got forecasted inflation for Japan and the United States. And we've got some interest rates here as well. The 360-day euro-yen deposit of 4.69%, euro-dollar deposit equivalently of 10.49%. And so we have here a number of variables that we are going to have to work with, some data assumptions. So I'm going to put those kind of hanging here to the left because we're going to be grabbing them for various formula. And first, what we're being asked to do is to look at parity conditions, diagram and calculate whether international parity conditions hold between Japan and the United States. And so when we're talking about parity conditions, we're sort of talking about an idealized or equilibrium world in which, the future spot rate is an implicit forecast, or rather the forward rate is an implicit forecast of the future spot rate, that we can get spot rates from just looking at inflation differentials, that we can look at future spot rates by looking at those inflation differentials, and that we can get future spot rates by looking at interest rate differentials, where interest rate includes an inflation component and a real rate of interest kind of component. Let's look at that first idea, put pen to paper for that first idea, for where we kind of have this expectation that forward rates that we're seeing today are kind of forecasts for what the future spot rate will be when that forward rate matures. In other words, if there's a difference between those two, between forward rate and spot rate, if there's a forward premium or discount, what parity conditions are kind of saying is that percentage premium or discount is actually the amount by which the current spot rate is expected to increase or decrease. So you have to calculate, like we've seen before, a forward premium or discount for this forward currency using forward rates and spot rates. That means we're going to use this one here, the Japanese yen forward, and this one here, the current spot rate today. We just kind of plug those in. The spot exchange rate is that 91 yen to the dollar. And then the 1 year forward rate is that 86 yen to the dollar. And here what we're seeing is a forward premium, that is, it's a positive number of 5.8%. So the yen is actually trading stronger. It's trading at a premium in the forward market versus the current spot rate. $1 buys fewer yen. The yen is getting stronger. In other words, that's why we're seeing a forward premium. All right, so this is parity number one. One way to check parity by looking at forward rate forecasts. The other that we talked about or mentioned briefly is the idea that we can look at differences in inflation or expected rate of inflation between the two countries and use that as a measure of forecast for what the currency is going to do. If a country's currency is expected to have high inflation relative to another, then that country's currency is expected to weaken. So to test that out here, what we have are these two numbers, the forecasted rate of inflation for Japan and the forecasted rate of inflation for the United States. We just take these two numbers, Japan first, of 1.107%, subtract out the US's 6.907%, and what we've got is minus 5.8%. It's just a minus because in this case we have Japan here on the left. what we're interested in, when we compare these two, what we're interested in is in absolute terms. So that's okay. They're both saying the same thing intuitively. Dollars got higher inflation than the yen. And so it's expected that the dollar is going to weaken by 5.8%. Same kind of thing. We're saying that the yen is going to strengthen by 5.8% here. So the two parity conditions here are saying the same thing. And we just have one more parity condition to check. And that is the idea that we can use interest rate differentials, differences in nominal interest rates between the two countries. That is nominal meaning an interest rate that includes inflation plus some kind of real underlying rate of interest over and above inflation. And you'll see that the formula itself is very similar to what we were just looking at. We take, instead of the rate of, that's because that's the wrong formula. We take the difference in forecasted annual interest rates, not inflation rates, but interest rates between the two countries. Here we're taking Japan's minus interest rates in the US. And the idea is the same. The difference in interest rates between the two countries, if parity is strictly holding, will give us a sense of where the currency is going forward. If interest rates are really high in the US, we expect that that currency will weaken relative to a place where interest rates are really low. This is, by the way, a fundamental viewpoint. We'll see that this actually doesn't always hold in real life, especially in the short term. It's actually the opposite. But what we're looking at here in terms of parity conditions, especially this one, is more of a long-term effect. All of these are kind of idealized conditions. The forward rate is a good rough measure of what the spot rate will be, but it's not exactly precisely and presciently correct. These are kind of guideposts, but they won't apply always perfectly in real life. But with that caveat, let's go ahead and use the data that we've got. The last bit of data, these interest rates. So we've got interest rates, 1-year interest rates in Japan and 1-year interest rates in the US. So let us slide those in. 4.691% for Japan and 10.491% for the US, 1-year rates. And that interest rate differential is, lo and behold, also minus 5.8%. So in answer to this question, whether international parity conditions hold between Japan and the United States, the answer would be yes, yes, and yes. All right, so all of these three methods, these kind of fundamental approaches, are saying that the yen will strengthen by 5.8%, or, the other side of the same coin, the US dollar will weaken by 5.8%. So that was going to help us, that's what we need to answer part B here. Find the forecasted change in the Japanese yen to the US dollar exchange rate 1 year from now. In fact, we can really just stop at this point and say the change, or the percentage change, is going to be 5.8%. The yen is going to strengthen by 5.8%. If you wanted to, for context, kind of just work that out manually, you can take a look at what the exchange rate is today, this 91 Japanese yen to the dollar, and say, well, if the yen is going to strengthen by 5.8%, that means I have to kind of go the other way, 1 minus 0.058, because I can't just multiply this, right? If I do 91 times 1.058, this is going to give me the wrong answer. It's going to give me a number greater than 91. And that's kind of making the yen weakening. It's going to be like $1 buys more yen, implying a weaker yen. So intuitively, I know I need to go the other way to calculate if the yen is going to strengthen by 5.8%. This is the calculation that's going to get me there to figure out what that exchange rate is going to be. If I simplify things here, we have that 91, and then the stuff in the parentheses, that's 0.942. that means the yen is going to go to an exchange rate of, rounded, lo and behold, 86 Japanese yen to the dollar. And that's kind of what we're getting just by going the other way around with each one of these parity condition checks. Each one of these parity condition checks is saying, based on our current exchange rate, based on inflation differentials, based on a forecast of the current spot rate, based on the fact that the forward rate is currently 86 yen to the dollar. It's all kind of pointing out future exchange rate 1 year from now to the yen of 86. So this is all kind of a set of fundamental approaches to reading towards where exchange rates are going to go. And later on, what we're going to talk about is more market-driven or alternative approaches to figure out where exchange rates are going to go.